It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. If I sound muffled, it's because Momo was in front of my mouth. He stuck his head in my mouth just as I was about to start the video, and we just roll with it, right, Momo? Because Momo is feeling super better after his teeth surgery, right, Momo? No snotty nose, no chattering from ouchies. Momo is feeling good. A lot of singing at the beginning of this Feedback Friday, but that's what you're here for. That and responding to feedback. You know what I'm going to do now. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeettaK. You see what's happening here. the patrons got a video of Momo coming back from the vet when he was like high, and he was even more affectionate than this. This is Momo's natural state, hugging. But yes, you don't come here for the crazy cat lady routine. Maybe some of you do. Right, Momo? Yeah, not crazy, love, yeah. But really good feedback on the Netflix thing. I apologize for not more content this week. It was a crazy week. In part, I got my COVID booster, and I was one of those unlucky people that just got knocked flat by it. 2 days just down. I'm glad it's over with. I am still not totally up to speed. I thought it was because everybody else I know who got it had a delayed reaction. So they started feeling crappy on like the third day. And so I'm like, okay, I'll get it on like this day. So by the time I'm feeling shitty, it'll be this day. Right away. Just knackered. But we still have feedback. And I appreciate the high level conversation and the actual digging down on the Netflix thing. I think these are really important discussions to have. And again, the good faith discussion is more important than the conclusions on this one, because I mean, none of us know for sure. All of this streaming service analysis is reading the tea leaves. Having the discussion in a way where people bring up new information and disagree, or adapt the argument and stuff like that in a way that is not even civil. It's fun and it's productive and it's friendly and it's respecting everybody's intelligence. That's the goal, right? Having the discussion is sometimes more important than any outcome of that discussion, because it proves we can have discussions about things without things going to shit. And so I greatly appreciate that. Good job, everybody. One of the things that came up quite a bit was my omission of the whole Dave Chappelle thing, right, Momo? On Netflix. And I think that was possibly my own blind spot, as I don't like calling myself a comedian, but stand-up comedy is one of the jobs I have done. You guys know I don't get attached to very many identifiers. Gamer is possibly the only one that sticks. I'm not kidding. I don't know why. But yeah, the people going crazy and telling people what they're allowed to make jokes about, as long as a stand-up routine is clearly labeled like adults only, all that stuff. There's a whole distinction in the comedy world between clean comedy and, not clean comedy. I do both. Part of the reason that Ellen DeGeneres did so well for as long as she did is they were looking for a female clean comic who was actually funny. And there was Ellen and Ellen and Ellen. The late Bob Saget, rest in peace, is one of the people who could do both really well. If you haven't seen Bob Saget's more adult comedy, I highly recommend it. Shocked the shit out of me because I first knew him from Full House. dude's funny. Uh, um, but, and like I said, maybe this is a bias. I see the point that the Chappelle thing definitely did draw the culture war. And perhaps I don't see it with the same deliberateness as some of the nerd shows that were clearly marketed and calibrated to bait people before they even watched the thing. The Chappelle special is a different thing to me. And I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm just saying this is my perspective. I find the viewpoints of people who singled out the Chappelle special as an especially ugly culture war point. You're right. It did get extremely ugly. The thing about that is that people were actually violating people's ability to avoid the content by throwing it on the internet, right? It wasn't people going bonkers over, say, Masters of the Universe when only the first half of the series was out and coming to firm conclusions about stuff nobody had seen. The Dave Chappelle stuff was offensive. The thing about comedy, especially stand-up comedy, especially really unrefined, raw stand-up comedy like Chappelle is doing on those Netflix specials, I have no idea why that's the stuff you workshop on, like, you know, smaller clubs, sometimes on improv night. You don't put it on a Netflix special, but, you know, he did Where His Muse Took Him. That's going to shake out the way it shakes out. But that was something that if people should have been allowed to not watch that shit. And the controversy surrounding the Chappelle special denied people the right to not watch that shit. And that wasn't Netflix doing that. That was the punditry. That was the hot takes doing that. And so this is one of these examples of, I'm not saying the people that cited Chappelle as a culture war moment are wrong. You're absolutely right. It just was decidedly different than the cuties phenomenon, which, let's face it, was mostly about the poster. A lot of the people, and I'm not saying the movie Cuties was that was another one that brought up that I didn't mention that other people did. The Cuties movie was disturbing. And I guess this is one of the things about Netflix, is that previously you'd see a movie like Cuties at a film festival where you expect kind of out there shit, for lack of a better term. I've seen some weird shit at the Toronto International Film Festival. That's what it's there for. And much like how Hamilton got a very different reception when it was put on Disney Plus than it was in Broadway audiences, where Broadway audiences went, hey, roles for Black people on Broadway. That's super necessary. And it's great that there's finally a musical where, you know, being not white is of benefit to you getting the part, as opposed to it being, you know, a disadvantage traditionally. So Broadway audiences looked around the fact that Alexander Hamilton and others were slave owners. People called that shit out on Disney Plus. Lin-Manuel Miranda handled it very well. That's sometimes what happens when things leave their original intended viewing space, for lack of a better term. The translation doesn't always work. And I think that's what happens with some of these more raw comedy specials. 'Cause, I mean, I used to go to, they had all these like cheesy names, the Late Show at a comedy club, which was intentionally like really raw deliberately offensive, cathartic comedy. And everybody knew when you walked in, that was what you got. Nobody could claim they didn't know. There were advisory warnings all over the posters right when you bought the ticket. We live in an age where that ironic safe space no longer exists. And comedians are really struggling with that because even in a club like that, everybody has phones and anybody can be recording you. Look what happened to Michael Richards. You know, remember him from Seinfeld? Kramer, lovable guy until he got canceled. For yes, he did drop N-bombs. That was not smart or wise of him, but, you know, he was an older comic and he didn't adapt to circumstances the same way. And I think Dave Chappelle is also in that boat. And, you know, I did some super offensive comedy back in the day. I mean, it was on television. We knew what it was, but Canadian standards and US standards, we discovered were very different. Canada has a much greater tolerance for boobs than the US does. Welcome to Canada. We're great here. But yeah, the fact that we were really thrown by because we have this perception of the US as this sort of bastion of free speech. And it's not in practice. The amount they chopped 3 minutes out of every show. They had to for commercial breaks, but it was also content. You can do things on Canadian television that you can't do in the US. And that's why when anybody starts attacking Canada on free speech grounds, in practice, you can do more in Canada than you can on US airwaves. The UK is a completely different standard of censorship. We tried to be on the air in the UK. We were on TV4 Manchester. And then there was something cable or something like that, like Sky Network type thing. But apparently you can show things in the UK, but there's certain things you can't talk about. And we ran afoul of that. So I've been censored in multiple countries. Finland loved us. And Portugal, we did well in Portugal. But that was a really interesting first-hand view into the realities of freedom of expression and tolerance for obscenity and how different markets actually respond to things as opposed to what it is on paper. And the problem is that increasingly, we know there are two Americas, but we're finding there are two Canadas as well. I don't know if anybody's following the trucker convoy protest going on here. It is a minority view regarding vaccines, but I think maybe that's part of the thing that made me finally do it. It was partially because I actually got a break in a work schedule where I could be out for a few days, but not the days I expected. But, you know, seeing this and going, you know what, I got to get this done because if people are being crazy about this, and that's how we see it in Canada. That's no slight. That is just how people talk about anti-vaxxers up here. We do not have the same history. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have a very, very vocal minority on this stuff. But this is where media constantly goes wrong and drives me crazy. And there's an interesting Politico article I'm going to link to if anybody's interested in reading it, about the need to build back media institutions and news institutions as to things that people can trust. because of the fact that there is a complete loss of control over the Overton window. It's like the Overton window has been broken and boarded up, and nobody knows what mainstream opinion is anymore. So every time some radical take shows up somewhere, everybody freaks out because they think it's instantly going to be normalized. I mean, the latest fight is apparently about Minnie Mouse in a pantsuit that's like a Stella McCarthy licensed tie-in. And this is another one, right? That I looked at that and went, someone sold a license, because this is what Disney does now. Vera Wang, Stella McCarthy, all those things. These are brand partnerships that Disney makes money on. So if somebody pays them a bunch of money for the Stella McCarthy brand on it, brand on it, to put Minnie Mouse in an ugly blue pantsuit, well, they're going to do it. It's no change to status quo. I mean, Minnie was in like jazzercise outfits in the 80s. This is something that has always been done. It's just about making money in a period of time where Disney's theme park business is down. But Disney pivoted about the time that they shut down Disney Infinity, the video game, thing with the Toys to Life stuff. They decided to go strictly external licenses because there was no risk there. They knew exactly how much money they were going to make. And in the case of video games just did not have the profit margins that other areas did. It wasn't that Disney Infinity wasn't profitable. Disney Infinity was not profitable enough for Disney at the time. Of course, they've gone back on that, in part because of things like the EA Star Wars debacle, and they're going back to having more creative control. But Minnie Mouse in a pantsuit is not anything that people should be freaking out about. However, because there is no sense of normalcy anymore, every time one of these things happen, people treat it like a fight to the death. And I get it. I wish that there was more institutional memory for media in the 90s, media in the 2000s, the last wave of political correctness, and how it didn't take. The issue with social media is that it is a minority, as about 18% of the population driving opinion on social media. And so people have lost the reality that this is not what 82% of people think. And it's driving politics. It's driving media. Now, media makes a lot more sense than politics because, media, you can make good bank on that 18%. Media is all about micro-targeting and enthusiasm and, sign-ups and merchandise and all that stuff. You don't need a majority to have a successful video game or TV show. You need, depending if you're the CW or CBS or whatever, you need to sell about, 10 million copies of video game around the world. Not even, depending on budget. If 6 million people watch a network TV show now, that's great. So on and so forth. You don't need the majority. That's not, the population of the US is like 300 million and change. Obviously 6 million, tiny drop in the bucket, right? So it makes sense that media would feed this beast to an extent, right? The streaming and premium cable, even smaller numbers. Look at the ratings on Game of Thrones. It's dwarfed by network. Now, who's watching network? Older, middle of the road boomers and me. Compared to premium cable, and they're like, well, but that's where the advertisers are. But premium cable isn't really. Yes, there's embedded advertising, but it's not they're selling subscriptions. I mean, okay, Cobra Kai is full of brand placements, which I find fascinating. But yeah, that's a subscription service. That's a different service. And you don't need you know, almost 80 million people to vote for you the way you do is, say, in a presidential election. You need 6 million. Very different strategy, right? The problem is that people are setting their politics based on media. And media is not life. You know, you look at the stuff in the 80s, sitcoms, maybe. But even sitcoms are sort of reflections of a reality we would like to have, not the reality that existed. I mean, the 80s was the era of Dallas and Dynasty and, primetime soap operas, where that was the way we wanted rich people to actually live because they were all miserable and hated each other. But it was very glamorous with the houses and the clothes and the cars and everybody ending up in the pool in Dallas, right? Now, for whatever reason, and part of it is a shift in marketing, we don't see media as aspirational anymore. We see media as affirmational. We collectively need media to reflect our lives. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't watch those shows anymore. I don't watch representative media anymore. I don't want that. I like really bent left turn at Albuquerque shows. Like right now, the shows I'm loving are, I love Doom Patrol. You guys know I love Doom Patrol. Peacemaker is shocking the shit out of me of how good it is, but please see Suicide Squad. Well, you don't have to, but Suicide Squad's really good too, the movie. And then stuff like Resident Alien. They're all satirical, right? Satire is coming back. And the fact that 2 out of those 3 shows are like, well, they're all comic books, but they're not the big comic books. They're like D-list comic books. Even Superman and Lois is bringing in some like not, it's not the big expected villains. I won't spoil it, but I called it. I was so freaking excited. Superman and Lois. But satire is coming back. And I just think that's so important because the other thing that people mentioned in the comments, and I have touched on this. I don't know why I got lost in this video, but the thing where Netflix is really killing it is these sleeper international hits. And it's because they're not westernized media. You watch stuff from Korea, you watch stuff from South Korea, you watch stuff from Spain. It's about class warfare and economic inequality. It's not about identity politics. And they throw in things like, Money Heist deals with the tension between New World Latin America and, the colonial underpinnings from Spain, and how people from places like Colombia and things like that are treated second class in Spain, and dialect and accent and things like that all matter a great deal. And so much of the media coming out of Korea, Squid Game and Parasite was the same way. It's all about class and class structure and class warfare. And I think through that structure, they're able to create characters that are actually characters, and you can start predicting what these characters will do because they're so well developed. And when they do something that surprises you, it eventually makes sense most of the time. They're crafting characters. They're telling new stories, which is what Western media believes can't be done. All the stories are told, so it's just nostalgia properties. And this is the myopia of Hollywood. This has always been a problem in North American entertainment. Canadian media doesn't know what the fuck it's doing. But American entertainment gets very myopic. American media, New York, often doesn't know stories outside of New York. It's completely detached. Same with Chicago. Same with LA. I don't know about Atlanta. Atlanta is becoming more of a hub. Georgia, in general, is becoming like a production hub. But Georgia is made to look like so many other places that maybe they're not so bad. But yeah, those media hubs in America, you talk to people down there and they have no concept of anything outside of that city. And I mean, yes, both New York, LA, Chicago, they're all so huge. It is so easy to get lost in them. People who live in downtown Toronto have a version of this too. I'm not saying Toronto's immune. The rest of Canada kind of makes fun of Toronto for that reason. But yeah, American media is very myopic. Animation is certainly flagging behind anime, though I think borrowing from other traditions like they did with Encanto, or immersing, I won't say borrowing, immersing in other traditions will help some with that. But this twist with fantasy and picking up these properties that are by their very nature medievalist European and then trying to make them shoehorn into some sort of representation of an America they don't understand. And I mean, one person in the comments pointed out that they're mad at Disney Plus because they haven't been treating the Netflix Marvel stuff with respect. And other people went, I would respond, but that's a spoiler. And I'll leave that there. And this is the thing that sort of sucks is that people, and this is what the original video is about, people aren't sampling because they've been so burned right at the time where it seems like some of these services are starting to learn their lesson. And, you know, people have pointed out, there were things in the comments about how the MCU content is underperforming. I won't say that's true across the board because, I mean, look at Shang-Chi. But again, Shang-Chi was an original idea that people flocked to. MCU stuff is like anything else. If something's not very good, people are going to be skeptical about the next thing you put out. Now, what I will say about Disney Plus is there's a ton of stuff outside of the Marvel stuff. The Marvel stuff isn't all that's there. Like I said, Only Murders in the Building is phenomenal. The teen sports shows, Big Shot and the Mighty Ducks show are both very heartwarming. There is some neat stuff on Disney Plus. I'm not proselytizing for Disney Plus. I just want to be accurate, and Marvel and Star Wars are not all that service is about. And let's face it, Marvel and Star Wars are both very viable brands. The Marvel stuff has just really been faltering on the writing. And that's going to affect it, but they can rebound, as Shang-Chi showed. Yeah, interested to hear your ongoing thoughts. Again, I do think the dialogue happening and being very positive was the most important thing here. Like my weaponized positivity from Wellness Wednesday this week. But yeah, I'm interested. I'm just interested in drawing out more thoughts and hopefully you found the sort of business structure stuff, the little glancing off the surface, that I did. Hopefully you find that interesting and informative, and looking forward to more of your feedback. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.